NEOM was never just a city. From the very first moment Mohammed bin Salman announced the project, it was clear that this wasn't about infrastructure or architecture, but about a political manifesto. A manifesto of a prince who wants his name to be forever associated with a breakthrough, not with continuity. In Saudi Arabia, every ruler has left a mark. King Abdulaziz, the founder, united scattered tribes and created a state. King Fahd left behind mosques, highways, and satellite television. King Abdullah brought education reforms and major universities. Mohammed bin Salman did not want to be just one more in the line. He wanted to be the one who shows the world that Saudi Arabia can not only live off oil, but also set new civilizational directions. NEOM was meant to be his pyramid, his Tower of Babel, his Manhattan, a monument built not for God, but for history. But it is also a tool of domestic policy. NEOM was supposed to become a kind of therapy for the nation, especially for the young. 60% of Saudis are under 30. It's a generation bored with conservative sermons, raised on smartphones and Instagram, looking at Dubai, Los Angeles, or Tokyo, and asking, why do we live in a world of restrictions if we have billions of dollars from oil? MBS understands this perfectly. NEOM is his answer. He tells the young, you have a dream? Then have it here with us in Saudi Arabia. You don't have to escape to London or Paris. We'll build your world for you in the desert. At the same time, NEOM is a tool of control. It is a project that fuses the prince's power with a new kind of legitimacy. If he remained just the crown prince, his position could be questioned. But as the creator of NEOM, he becomes something more, a visionary, an architect of the future. Whoever criticizes NEOM is no longer criticizing a city, but the prince himself, and thus the direction in which Saudi Arabia is heading. In this way, the futuristic project becomes a political tool to silence dissent. And finally, NEOM is a bargaining chip in the global game. In a world where China is building its megacities and Dubai presents itself as the capital of luxury, Saudi Arabia did not want to remain just a country of oil. NEOM is an answer to both West and East. It's a declaration. We are an equal player. We don't just sell you oil. We show you what your future will look like. The render of the line becomes not only a vision of a city, but a diplomatic weapon. Abdul Rahman, loyal to the state, repeats, this is the greatest achievement of our generation. Thanks to NEOM, the world will speak of Saudi Arabia as a pioneer, and Mohammed bin Salman will go down in history as the creator of a new civilization. Aisha, more skeptical, notes, but if it's only a facade, NEOM will become a monument to hubris. And then the prince's name will go down in history not as a visionary, but as a ruler who confused dreams with reality. So NEOM is not just an urban project, it is a political spectacle, inside and outside. Inside the country, to rally the young around the prince's vision. Outside, to show the world that Saudi Arabia is not a relic of the past, but the avant-garde of the future. A theater in which every glass skyscraper is a prop and every marina is a stage. A theater where Mohammed bin Salman plays the leading role, the role of a ruler who wants to leave behind a city bigger than life. Every Saudi ruler left a mark, but Mohammed bin Salman knew from the outset that his mark had to be bigger than highways or mosques. He needed a vision that would give his rule meaning and rank. That's how NEOM was born, a city meant to be not only an economic project, but also a political pillar of his reign. Inside the country, NEOM acts as a propaganda keystone. It is the project that holds together the state's narrative. The prince gives the nation a future instead of a past. Young Saudis, who form the majority of society, are meant to see in NEOM a promise of jobs, entertainment, modernity, and even greater freedom. Conservative sermons are supposed to give way to futuristic brochures, and traditional life to the narrative of a Saudi Arabia of the 21st century. It's no coincidence that NEOM appears in state media almost every day. Television shows, visualizations, newspapers write about new contracts. MBS uses NEOM as a symbol of the new Saudi Arabia, one he is personally creating and of which he is the sole guarantor. In this way, the project becomes an instrument to legitimize his rule. Criticizing NEOM is criticizing the nation's future, and criticizing the nation's future is criticizing the prince himself. But NEOM also works on the emotional level. A young Saudi who sees a render of the line does not think about Bedouin evictions or greenwashing. He thinks, "This will be my world. At last, I don't have to dream about Dubai or Los Angeles. Dubai will be dreaming about us." Mohammed bin Salman understands this psychology. He knows that the young generation is his greatest asset and his greatest threat. If he gives them dreams, he keeps them on his side. If he doesn't, he loses their loyalty. NEOM is therefore not only a construction project, but also a loyalty project. It is meant to make young Saudis feel part of a grand vision that only MBS can deliver. Abdul Rahman says, "Thanks to the prince, we will have a future. NEOM is proof that our country can be the best in the world." Aisha replies, "But if everything is tied only to his name, what happens when he is no longer there? Can a city built on the cult of one man survive the test of time?" Power in Saudi Arabia has always rested on oil, religion, and the royal family. Mohammed bin Salman is trying to add a new foundation, a city of the future. But this foundation, impressive as it is fragile, because it is based not on consensus, but on the will of a single man. From the beginning, it was clear that NEOM was not just an internal game. It was also a project meant to speak to the world. Saudi Arabia, associated for decades with oil, conservatism, and harsh laws, wanted to show a different face, the face of a futuristic giant outrunning both West and East. In this sense, NEOM is diplomacy cast in concrete and glass. When MBS presented the line or octagon at global conferences, he spoke a language designed not only to impress investors, but also public opinion. A render works faster than an ambassador. It is easier to persuade people with the image of a city of the future than with a story about political reforms. NEOM has become the calling card of Vision 2030, the plan through which Saudi Arabia wants to free itself from oil dependence. But just as important is that the city is meant to transform the country's image. Instead of desert, camels, and oil, glass, steel, and artificial intelligence. Instead of a strict monarchy, a modern innovation hub. The world was meant to see not an archaic kingdom, but a laboratory of the future. NEOM is also a weapon in the battle for investors. Contracts worth billions tempt corporations from Europe, the US, and Asia. For many companies, questions about human rights or the environment fade next to the vision of gigantic profits. Saudi Arabia knows this, and that is why NEOM is so prominently featured in international media. It's not just an urban project, it's political marketing. But there is a third dimension, geopolitical. NEOM is a bargaining chip in relations with major powers. With China, technological and infrastructure cooperation. With the US and Europe, contracts for corporations that are supposed to soften political criticism. With the region, a rivalry with Dubai and Abu Dhabi over the title of Capital of the Middle Eastern Future. Abdul Rahman repeats, "At last, the world will admire us, not just for oil, but for vision. They will come here to learn from us." Aisha notes, "The world admires easily, as long as the money flows. What happens if NEOM becomes an empty symbol? Admiration will quickly turn into laughter." NEOM is thus foreign propaganda in its purest form, a story meant to cover up controversies and reframe the world's view of Saudi Arabia. The only question is whether that image will withstand its collision with reality. In politics, great dreams can be as dangerous as great failures. From the start, NEOM was meant to be a symbol of Mohammed bin Salman's strength, his calling card, and monument. But precisely for that reason, the project carries enormous political risk. If the vision does not come true, it will not be only a city that collapses, it will be the prince's reputation. Saudi Arabia has seen such stories before. In the 1970s, Major infrastructure projects promised a new golden age, but many turned into half-empty developments that today stand as sun-baked shells. Dubai had its own crisis in 2009 when skyscrapers became symbols of debt, not prestige. Mohammed bin Salman knows that the world is watching NEOM and waiting, with admiration, but also suspicion. The greatest risk lies in the scale of expectations. The line, Oxagon, Trojana, Sindala, each is marketed as the biggest in the world. But the higher you set the bar, the more painful the fall. If in 5 or 10 years NEOM turns out not to be a gleaming futuristic paradise, but a half-built mock-up, the whole world will see in it not just an investment failure, but a political humiliation for the prince. The second risk is the social cost. Displaced Bedouins, exploited migrants, disillusioned young Saudis, all of this can turn NEOM into a symbol of inequality instead of progress. If public frustration grows, it won't be architects from London or investors from New York who will be blamed. It will be the prince's own nation turning away from the vision it was meant to believe in. The third danger is political centralization. Mohammed bin Salman has tied his name to NEOM so tightly that he has left himself no margin for error. To criticize NEOM is to criticize the prince. But if NEOM itself begins to stumble, over costs, delays, economic crises, he too will become the target. The bigger the project, the bigger the shadow it casts when it starts to fall. Aisha notes, rulers have always built monuments, but history also knows cases where those monuments became their tombstones. Abdurrahman replies, that won't happen. NEOM is too big to fail, too important to fall. And that is precisely where the biggest paradox lies. Because too big to fail is often the first step towards failure. NEOM is Mohammed bin Salman's chance to go down in history as a visionary, but it is also a risk that he will be remembered as a ruler who mistook a render for reality. NEOM is not just a Saudi project, it is a global stage where the interests of great powers, corporations, and ideologies intersect. Mohammed bin Salman knows that in a post-pandemic world, in an era of climate crisis and US-China rivalry, a city of the future can become more than an investment. It can become a symbol of who has the right to set the direction of civilization. For the United States, NEOM is both an opportunity and a challenge. American tech giants are getting contracts worth billions. From building energy systems to artificial intelligence that is supposed to manage the city. But at the same time, NEOM is a reminder that Saudi Arabia is no longer just a client, but a player choosing its partners. China looks at NEOM from a different angle. For Beijing, it is a natural piece of the Belt and Road Initiative. The futuristic port of Oxagon could become another node in the global trade network. Chinese construction and tech companies are counting on contracts, but also on something more. A strategic foothold in Saudi Arabia that could shift the balance of power in the Middle East. Europe is torn. On the one hand, German, French, and Italian engineering firms are already working on elements of NEOM. On the other, European public opinion is increasingly vocal about human rights, Bedouin evictions, and ecological greenwashing. For Brussels, NEOM is a test. Are values more important than billion-dollar contracts? But NEOM is also a tool of regional competition. The Emirates, pioneers of innovation for decades, can feel a rival breathing down their neck. Dubai built its prestige on luxury and openness, but NEOM promises to surpass it in scale and ambition. It is a race to decide who will be the calling card of the Middle East in the 21st century. Dubai, or NEOM. On this global stage, each player sees something different in NEOM. For the US, an ally, but also an independent partner. For China, a gateway to the region. For Europe, a moral dilemma. For the Emirates, a competitor. For the rest of the world, a spectacle showing how oil wealth tries to transform itself into tech wealth. Abdul Rahman says, thanks to NEOM, the world will finally understand that Saudi Arabia is the center, not the periphery. Aisha replies, but if you play in the global theater, you have to accept that the world not only watches, but also judges. Sometimes it applauds, and sometimes it boos. In this sense, NEOM is not just a city. It is a political spectacle on a world stage, where Saudi Arabia is trying to play the lead. But every stage has an audience, and audiences can be merciless. Every great ruler tries to leave behind something that will outlast generations. The pharaohs had their pyramids, Roman emperors their aqueducts and the Colosseum, the sheikhs of the Emirates, Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Mohammed bin Salman chose NEOM, but his legacy will not depend on the number of tons of steel and concrete, but on how the world and the nation remember the project. If NEOM succeeds, Mohammed bin Salman will go down in history as a visionary who turned the desert into the center of the world. His name will be associated with courage, modernization, and with an era in which Saudi Arabia ceased to be only an oil producer and became a symbol of innovation. In that scenario, NEOM becomes not only a city, but a political legend, proof that MBS was more than just another crown prince. But if NEOM fails, if it turns out to be too expensive, too difficult, too detached from reality, the legacy will be very different. Then NEOM will become a monument to hubris, a symbol of waste and mismanagement that will weigh on the prince's memory like unfinished palaces weighed on the memory of past monarchs. The biggest risk is that NEOM is a project so tightly bound to one person that there is no plan B. If it works, all the glory will fall on Mohammed bin Salman. If it doesn't, all the responsibility will too. In this sense, NEOM is not only a city, but a bet on history. Abdul Rahman repeats, "Our children will speak of the prince as the one who gave them a future. NEOM will be like New York, eternal, iconic." Aisha replies, "Or they may speak of him as a ruler who built a mirage, beautiful but fragile. And when the desert sand covers the glass and concrete, what will remain is the memory of arrogance greater than the possibilities." The legacy of NEOM is not predetermined. It is a story still being written, one that may become a triumph or a warning. Mohammed bin Salman has risked everything to make sure his name is remembered. But history has this trait. It never asks what a ruler wanted to leave behind. It asks what actually survived. Every political project of this scale sooner or later stops being just a vision and becomes a test for the entire state. NEOM is no exception. It is not only an urban experiment, but a mirror in which the future of Saudi Arabia will be reflected, its successes and its failures. The authorities present NEOM as part of Vision 2030, a plan for modernization and economic diversification. Saudi Arabia wants to move beyond oil dependence and become a global player in technology, tourism, and innovation. But whether NEOM actually works will show whether the country is capable of such a transformation or whether it will get stuck halfway. The biggest challenge is the structure of the state itself. Saudi Arabia remains an absolute monarchy, where decisions are made top-down and citizens have little influence over policy. NEOM is a fully centralized project, dependent on the will of one person. That allows for speed, but takes away flexibility. If something goes wrong, there are no correction mechanisms. There is only the prince's political will. The second challenge is social tension. The displacement of Bedouins, marginalization of migrants, promises to young people that may not be kept. All this creates a risk that NEOM will start dividing society instead of uniting it. And in a country where more than half the citizens are under 30, youth frustration can be a powerful force. The third element is geopolitics. If NEOM succeeds, Saudi Arabia will be seen as a regional leader and a global innovator. If it fails, the world will see a country that had the money, but not the capacity to turn it into real modernization. That would be a signal that Saudi Arabia knows how to build dreams, but not how to deliver them. Aisha says, "The future of my country shouldn't depend on a single vision. But today, everything revolves around NEOM. If it collapses, people's faith in reforms collapses with it." Abdul Rahman replies, "NEOM is proof that we can dream, and whoever can dream can also win." And that is where the biggest riddle lies. Will NEOM become a springboard that lifts Saudi Arabia into the role of global leader? Or a ball and chain that shows the country got stuck halfway between the desert and the future? This question will decide not only the fate of the city, but the fate of the entire kingdom. On the desert, where for centuries only silence and wind ruled, a structure is rising that is bigger than a dream. But NEOM is not only steel and glass. It is a mirror of power, in which the whole of Saudi Arabia is reflected. Its ambitions, its fears, its contradictions. For some, it is a symbol of courage, a prince who decided to lead the country out of the oil age and into the 21st century. For others, a symbol of hubris, in which one name becomes more important than the nation, and one project more important than tradition, nature, and people. Every render of the line is both a promise and a bet, because if NEOM succeeds, Mohammed bin Salman will be remembered as a ruler visionary who turned the desert into the center of the world. If it fails, he will be remembered as the prince who turned billions into a mirage. Aisha says quietly, "A city is never just a city. It's a story about who we are." Abdul Rahman answers proudly, "It's a story about who we will be." And that is where the greatest mystery of NEOM lies. It may be the future, it may be a warning, it may become a legend or a ruin. But one thing is certain. Out there in the desert where this city is being built, the history of not just one prince, but of the entire kingdom is being written. A history the whole world is watching,